Welcome, Buff fans. We're going to start rolling out some opponent previews with opposing beat writers, and I'm pleased to be joined by Chad Bishop, who covers Georgia Tech for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Chad, this is the opening game for the Buffs and Yellow Jackets, and it's kind of an exciting one. It's an intriguing
Yeah,
one. Programs that we were talking ahead of time have been linked for 35 years, yet have never met on the football field.
yeah, it's crazy. When it's even as an Atlanta native growing up, it's like Colorado and Georgia Tech sort of have this like weird unwritten rivalry, like having never
Yeah.
played, but it's like you took part of our national championship. And I was mentioned to you this summer, Brent Key was on a radio program somewhere and asked about it, and he said something, and I'm paraphrasing, like my team will definitely know about 1990. So
Yeah.
he's an alum. He's Georgia Tech through and through. He knows what happened in 1990. I was 7, so I have like vague recollections of the conversations and the newspaper articles and things like that. But yeah, so finally they can settle it on the football field if there's anything left to settle.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, the background is in 1990. Colorado was the AP national champion, the only national title they've ever won, and the UPI at the time, the coaches poll national champion was Georgia Tech, and that
Yeah.
for those that don't remember those days long ago, that's how the national title was decided, was in the polls, and so those two teams, and Chad, it's funny because Buff fans have long held it against former Nebraska head coach Tom Osborne, who apparently gave his vote in the coaches poll to Georgia Tech. And Nebraska had lost to CU, but then
Right.
also lost to Tech in the bowl game. And so
Yeah.
I think Nebraska might have been the only team that played both teams that year. And he gave the vote to Georgia Tech. And so and
So
they were
really, everybody should be anti-Nebraska, not anti each
oh,
other, is what it comes
and
down
they
to.
are
Yeah.
anti-Nebraska. There's no doubt about that. But and the poll that Colorado was the AP champion, Georgia Tech was two, the opposite in the coaches poll. So yeah, so they finally get to settle on the field. I don't know if this is going to decide the
Yeah.
1990 national title. None of these
It
guys were
should. It
alive
should.
then.
The,
It
t- the
should,
team
yeah,
should agree to that. Only they play
right.
each other too, so that might be a problem.
Yeah, raise the stakes a little bit, but it's clearly, obviously, very different programs. But I'm excited for this game because
Yeah.
like you said, you hear about Georgia Tech a lot. It's talked about a lot here because of 1990. But I'm excited because it's a new opponent and it's
Mhm.
it's it's a high quality opponent.
Yeah, and same thing for Georgia Tech's perspective, like to go out, west into the Rocky Mountains and
Hmm.
play a team that has, a ton of, hype for lack of a better word, and a ton of eyeballs on them, and Deion Sanders and his links to Atlanta as well, and everything that goes with Colorado in 2025, and Georgia Tech has done this the past couple of years, playing sort of these high stakes, big primetime openers, Dublin
Yeah.
last year against Florida State, and playing a Mercedes Benz a few times to open the season. So this certainly big from Georgia Tech's perspective of well to go, take its brand on the road and its team on the road and show it can get it done against a high quality opponent.
Yeah, you mentioned that game in Dublin. That was, well, obviously the longest road trip in recent years, but they haven't been this far west since
Mhm.
2013. They came out to BYU, so it's been a long time. And has there been any discussion about a trip like this? It's a unique trip for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think because of that Dublin trip, right? I mean, like the
Hmm.
team just flew across the ocean, and I knew that took a ton of logistical planning, like talking to, director of operations and equipment folks, and just like how far in advance they had to plan ahead and when they wanted to get out there earlier. I think, don't hold me to this, but I think the Yellow Jackets will come out to Colorado on that Wednesday, I
Hmm.
believe, before the game to sort of get themselves acclimated. And I think so. Again, going back to last year, having gone through that Dublin trip, they also went all the way up to Syracuse, New York. They go
Yeah.
down to Miami from time. I know it's apples to oranges a little bit, but I don't think it's anything that's going to throw them off completely.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly travel's not like it was
Yeah.
50 years ago, 100 years ago. And
Yeah,
it,
these kids travel all over
yeah.
these days,
Hmm.
camps and recruiting visits and cross country and flights being what they are. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's like the '60s anymore where it's this big,
Right.
culture shock for anyone.
Yeah, get on the train and you're on a 2-day train trip or whatever. Uh, uh, the one guy that has been out here is Haynes King.
Yeah.
He played against his second college start
Mm.
for Texas A&M was against the Buffs, actually at the Broncos Stadium, and that was the game where he injured his leg and season-ending injury that derailed his season there. And now, so Buff fans may remember him, but he only threw, I think, two passes that game
Yeah.
before he got injured. But he at least prepared for the Buffs.
Yeah.
Very, very different Buffs team now. But Yeah, Haynes King, much better player now than he was even back then when he was A&M starter. Can you talk about him a little bit and the progression you've seen with him? This is his third year with Tech, so you've seen his whole time at Tech, and so just talk about the player he's become.
Yeah, and for context sake, backing up for Haynes King, started his career at Texas A&M, spent 3 seasons there, got an undergraduate degree from Texas A&M,
Yeah.
and was actually recruited by Chris Winkie to Tennessee. And Chris Winkie is now Georgia Tech's co-offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. So after Haynes King had sort of a rocky career at Texas A&M with some injuries, like you mentioned, graduated from A&M and hopped in the transfer portal and found his way to Chris Winkie and Georgia Tech. And going into that fall camp of 2023, we weren't convinced that he was going to be the starter. It was him
Hmm.
versus Zach Pyron, who had been with the team the year before. And Haynes King won the job, and he's been the program ever since. I mean, he's a Texas-born kid,
Yeah.
talks like a Texan, acts like a Texan, plays quarterback like a Texan. One of the toughest football players you'll ever see. For those who don't know, played much of the season last year with a really bummed shoulder after a hit he took in the North Carolina game. Go back and look at some film against Georgia, playing 8 overtimes and sort of willing his team to a near victory, which would have been one of the bigger victories in recent Tech history. And just really a leader, and that gets thrown around a lot, but really truly is for the clubhouse. He's kind of a coach on the field. He joked last summer he interned in Chris Winkie's offense and Buster Faulkner's offense. Like, he has a future in coaching for sure if he doesn't make it in the NFL. Just a big time quarterback who can make a lot of throws, but also can beat you with his legs and putting his head and his shoulders down.
Yeah, he's a guy that if you didn't know much about him, go watch that overtime, the whole overtime against Georgia, and you gain a lot of respect for Haynes King. I remember watching that. That was one of the few times I saw Tech last year
Yeah,
was that game, and watching that overtime I was like, wow, that was pretty impressive.
yeah,
But he's obviously been the key, like you mentioned. But speaking of key, talk about Brent Key and kind of
yeah,
what he's done for this program. I mean, they Georgia Tech. I don't feel like they've ever been bad, but they
yeah.
weren't going to bowl games under Jeff Collins, and 2 years now in a row. I think it's 7-6 the last 2 years, right? So they're just getting into those bowls, but it's still winning records in bowl games. What has Brent Key meant to this program?
Yeah, he's been huge. He took over on an interim basis in 2022 after 4 games. After you mentioned Jeff Collins, he was fired that 4 games into that 2022 season. And Brent Key went 4-4 to close out that 22 year and then got the full-time job going into the 23 season. He's an alum, played offensive line at Georgia Tech, worked with some great coaches at Georgia Tech, starting his career, then went to Central Florida, followed George O'Leary, then to Alabama to work with
Hmm.
Nick Saban before coming back to Georgia Tech to work for Jeff Collins and then getting the job. And we're going to use that word culture, right? Like he's changed the culture, but truly, like he's a hardworking dude. He's a no nonsense dude, and typical offensive lineman mindset, right? Like put your head down, go to work, and shut up, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
this Georgia Tech team does. Now they've been terribly inconsistent the last few years. Like they'll beat a top 5 Miami at home. They'll lose to a Bowling Green State at home. They'll
Hmm.
go on the road and beat Miami. And then like last year, go on the road and lose to Syracuse. And Syracuse was a great team, but it's just been haven't been able to string a lot of wins together. And Brent Key knows that. He talks about it all the time, is raising the level of his program where it can consistently win, get to that 8, 9, 10 win plateau. A lot of people think this could be the year. Brent Key certainly thinks that he has a team that can maybe make that happen if they stay
Yeah.
healthy. But he has really energized the program, energized the fan base. People are all in on him and the program, and he's really been a godsend for Georgia Tech football so far.
Yeah, I was going to go offense defense, but I want to ask you
Mm,
feed off of that real quick because as
mm,
I was looking at Georgia Tech and
mm.
previewing this game a little bit, um, they're not going to be a favorite in the ACC. I mean that's going to be like a Clemson and what Miami teams like
Yeah,
that. Uh, North Carolina is going to get more talk, right?
sure, sure.
But when I look at Tech, when I was
Yeah.
looking at it, I'm like, that's a sleeper team in the
Mhm.
ACC. I mean, who knows if Clemson slips far enough, but like Tech's going to give people problems, right? I mean, do they believe and do you believe that they're a sleeper in the ACC?
Definitely. But there sort of in lies the problem also. And Brent Key
Yeah,
has talked about it, even going back to spring ball. Like it's odd because they've had 2 7-6 seasons back to back. So
yeah,
it's not like they've set the world on fire. And yet You type in Georgia Tech on social media or, Google, whatever, you're going to see them picked as a sleeper team, a team that could make some noise in the ACC, make a run to the
Yeah.
ACC title game. And they're dealing with that this summer and going into fall camp. The expectations have been raised with Haynes King coming back, with his
Hmm.
backup Aaron Philo coming back, with running back Jamal Haynes, a new defensive coordinator, and a lot of defensive talent. Their schedule is not as tough as it's been in years past. Yes, they have Colorado, Clemson, and Georgia, but outside of that, there's not really like a top 10 or top five team on
Yeah.
that schedule. So it's manageable. So for those reasons, yeah, Georgia Tech, a lot of expectations and a lot of hype around this football team. Brent Key is confident in this team, but he also knows if they eat that quote unquote rat poison that he and Nick Saban like to talk about,
Yeah.
that they're all flat on their face. So they got to deal with that going into the preseason, and then see if they can get the ball rolling from there.
Yeah, you mentioned Jamal Haynes. He's the other one. You look up offensively, and but from what I know, I mean, Brent Key wants to run the football. That's the base of the offense, right?
Yep.
Is Haynes King's legs and Jamal Haynes' legs. So is that the two keys? Is those two guys right there?
A little bit. Definitely the two stars to
Hmm.
watch for when they make their way out to Boulder. But I think one thing to watch as well is a revamped wide receiver room. Georgia Tech went deep into the portal, got a couple guys out of Florida International, number one. They bring back one of their top receivers in Malik
Hmm.
Rutherford. So who really steps up there in terms of the wide receivers? Do they have enough guys to rotate in and out and really give defenses fits? And then the next thing I'll mention is the offensive line. Georgia Tech's offensive line has been really good the past couple of years, but they
Yeah.
graduated some key players too. So they're pretty young and a little bit inexperienced there, but very, very talented in the
Hmm.
offensive line. So Haynes King and Jamal Haynes won't be able to produce if that offensive line doesn't take shape in August going
Yeah.
before they get out to Boulder or even really after that. So it's a team with a lot of talent at the skill position for sure, but that offensive line has to come together and has to gel sooner rather than later. This team is going to have some early success.
Yeah, and then move over to defense. I mean, they were okay last year. I mean, looks like it was solid defense. New
Yep.
coordinator though. Can you talk about him and coming over from Texas, the safeties coach last year, right? Blake
Yep.
Gideon. Can you talk about him and kind of what he's got to work with on defense? There's a lot of transfers there, right?
Yeah, definitely. Tyler Santucci left in January, maybe it was February, to go to the Baltimore Ravens and coach the linebackers. So Brent Key called Blake Gideon, former Texas All-Star safety,
Mhm.
then became a coach and became Texas's safeties coach and one of their key secondary recruiters. So he's a first-time defensive coordinator. Now the reviews on him are off the charts, as a coach and as a recruiter,
Mhm.
but it's his first time being a coordinator, right? So
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a wild card. There's definitely some talent and some depth at the linebacker position. The secondary looks strong, but getting after the pass rush or creating a pass rush and getting in the backfield has been a problem for this defense the past couple of years. So they went in the portal and tried to bulk up that defensive line. So there's a lot of new pieces there, including Blake getting the defensive coordinator. I'd be surprised if it turns out to be like a bad defense.
yeah.
I think it'll be like you said, a good defense, a pretty competitive defense. Can they take that next step to be a dominant defense, which will help them going back to what we've been talking about, making that next step and competing for an ACC title?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. And everybody in the portal these days,
Yeah.
in the portal era, it's so much of the key is how much do these guys come together. And Tech is one of those teams that looks like I don't know if it's more, it's not more than most, but I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of new faces that have got to come together. You got some keys, obviously, with Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, things like that. But um, how much talk is there of these guys coming together and like how
Yeah.
they're going to mesh together and really be that team that I think they can be?
Well, I give Brent Key a lot of credit because ever since he's gotten here, he's been very upfront about how he wants to run his program. He studies the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas
Mhm.
City Chiefs, a lot of the successful NFL franchises. He's not, afraid to take transfers. He wants transfers, but only really if they're good fits and if they supplement what they already have. So
Yeah.
if X number of linebackers graduated, if Y are too young and inexperienced, he's going to bring in Z at that
Mhm.
position. And that's what he did with the defensive line this past offseason. That's what he did with the wide receivers
Yeah.
this past offseason. So he's not just, grabbing guys off the grocery shelf, right? He's getting guys that are good fits for them and that can really take this team to the next level. Again, he calls it like free agency and like draft process. Like he's really into all that stuff. And now he's even more so into fitting it into the budget, right? Like how much is
Yeah.
everybody getting paid? And he told me at ACC spring meetings, he loves it. He loves opening up that Excel document and placing guys and what's everybody slotted and all that stuff. So, I don't think anybody really in that locker room worries about meshing or coming together because I think Brent Key and his staff are bringing in guys that they feel will do that easily. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring them in.
Yeah. Well, we've seen it a lot at Colorado. I mean, they've
Yeah.
done more transfer portaling than, I mean, they, especially that first year, more than most were doing at that time. A lot are doing it
Yeah.
now, but what a lot of the players would tell me and what we saw is young people can mesh pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know,
I what I always argue is like, I think as older guys like you and me, right? Like it's still hard to wrap our heads around.
yeah.
But like these guys play flag football on different teams and AAU
Mhm.
on different teams and can't and like now they're transferring high schools and I don't
Yeah.
really think they care as much as we or the fans do, right? So I think once they get into that clubhouse or into that locker room and start practices and they're solidified as part of that team, they're all in. And I don't think
Yeah.
there's like, well, he's a transfer, I don't like him, or he's a freshman, I don't like they're all on the same page. And I
Yeah.
don't think that's a big a deal. Now, certainly a slippery slope, right? You don't want to be the Florida States of last year, right? And go
Yeah.
2-10, bringing all these transfers. But at the same time, you could be like an SMU, or a Syracuse last year in the ACC who had great seasons. Louisville brings in a lot of transfers. So I think it's all about just, doing your
Yeah.
homework and bringing in right fits, which I think Brent Key and Deion Sanders have done a good job of.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something to be said for, if you played together for 2, 3 years, there's some innate things. But
Yeah.
like, I remember Shiloh Sanders told me last year, he's like, look, I don't need a year to find out if I like you and can trust you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We hang out once or twice, and like, yeah, that's a cool dude.
Yeah.
And so I think that happens a lot. Dion says that, Coach Sanders says that a lot, that, the younger generation, they can get along pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So,
And they all text each other before they meet each other and
right. Yeah.
talk each other and FaceTime each other. Like they're
Yeah.
all buds.
So bottom line, before we get out of here, what do you expect out of this Georgia Tech team? And are you looking forward to coming to Colorado?
I expect this team to be pretty good.
Mhm.
Like I'm talking maybe like 9 wins. I could see them losing the Colorado game and the Clemson game, but really going on a roll after that until they get to
Yeah.
Georgia. And does that put them up to 9 wins or 10 wins? I don't know. But if everybody stays healthy, I think they have a chance to be in the conversation to make that ACC title game. I really do. Now, again, can they deal with those expectations? Can they stay healthy? Those are the big wild cards.
Yeah.
As for me, I'm absolutely pumped, man. I cannot wait to get to Boulder. I've been to Denver. I've been to Fort Collins. I've not been to Boulder. So I cannot wait to check out campus and walk around the day of the game and see Folsom Field and just experience all that there is to experience about the University of Colorado and Colorado football. So everybody treat me well and give me some of that good Rocky Mountain hospitality.
Yeah, and you get a night game at Folsom, which to me
Wait.
is that's awesome. I mean, a
Yeah.
full Folsom at night is
Yeah.
pretty awesome. And you get the first game on the new artificial turf at Folsom
Amazing.
Field. So yeah,
Thanks.
Uh,
Tell the university thank you for doing that for me.
I will do that. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Chad. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you in August. It's gonna be
All
here
right.
before we know it.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.